Okay, so Etsy has just made some big changes to its creativity standards. You know that thing that it just launched a year or so ago where it talks about made by seller, sourced by seller, where it changed all its rules and it's updated these, and this could be impacting millions of Etsy listings. So you really need to check this because the rules have changed as far as I can tell. I haven't seen an official statement by Etsy on this yet. Interesting that they just talked about their transparency and how they made policies and didn't mention that they were making this change. But anyway, it has been made. People are up in arms. People are confused as well. These things are not always clear. Quite often, Etsy makes these changes and they say, oh, we've not actually made any changes. We're just clarifying things. Now, there are some changes here. I'll quickly go through my TLDRs and then we'll go through these. I've pulled up the rules side by side from a couple of weeks ago, what the policies looked like to what they look like just now. Couple of the big ones. Etsy is saying items now created by computerized tools. Who knows what this can be? Anything, a computerized tool cannot use a templated design or pattern. So people are talking about embroiderers, 3D printers, anyone who's using a computerized tool. You have to create your own designs, is what it sounds like Etsy saying just now. Another thing that's potentially not allowed on Etsy anymore is scans of vintage things. Now, I know there are many pattern makers on Etsy, say a knitting pattern or a sewing pattern, and they're quite annoyed. Well, they're quite lost in the sea of people who are just scanning old vintage patterns, and they're able to sell thousands of them. It's just, sell and relist for little effort, and they didn't create it. It's possible that these are no longer allowed on Etsy. If you sell any of these things, by the way, I'll show you what I'm seeing in the rules, and if you disagree, tell me in the comments, because a lot of these things are open to interpretation. It seems handpicked by the seller. If you're selling natural items, it seems these have to be things that you've found and that you've worked on, polished, cut, mounted, or whatever. They can't be items that you're just reselling. The example they give is like rocks from Depot. Um, with the sourced by you, it seems you can't be selling non-crafty tools. We'll get into all of this. And party supplies have to be only for single-use celebrations. I might be wrong. Check the comments. You're more likely to get something coherent there. I've been through everything. I've heard the people's complaints. Obviously like the computerized tools saying people can't embroider something onto a t-shirt where they've picked out the t-shirt that they're embroidering onto. They've picked out the threads and everything, but someone can buy a patch and sew it onto a t-shirt. So I get there seems open to interpretation, but I've pulled up these things side by side, and here is what I'm saying. So anything from the old policies, which were from a year ago, and anything that's changed in the past week. So anything that's old on the left, anything that's changed is on the right. So firstly, made by a seller section. These are physical items made by a seller by hand or using personal or computerized tools. So the big change here is where it was talking about using computerized tools. It used to say these items may be produced based on seller's original design or using a templated design or pattern. Now it says these items must be produced based on the seller's original design and are often personalized or customized. So it can't be used you can't use a templated design or pattern. It must be produced based on a seller's original design, is what Etsy is saying for made by a seller with computerized tools. And here are items that don't qualify as made by a seller. Now, there are quite a few areas in this where The wording has changed slightly. So in the do not qualify at these bottom bit here, it used to say adding a simple stick-on adornment such as commercially available stickers, stamps or rhinestone to a commercially available base item. Where now it says commercially available base item with only superficial alterations such as the addition of a simple mass-produced stick-on ornament. So this could be the exact same thing with the wording changed, but why would Etsy take the time? I assume all changes they make have to go through lawyers. They have to pay someone to make the changes. So there's a reason why they've changed the wording. So instead of saying adding simple stick-on adornment, it's with only superficial alterations. So can that also mean engraving a little bit onto something? What is superficial? Guess what, Etsy don't tell us. In the designed by seller section, sellers' original designs that are produced, printed by a third party or offered as a digital download. Etsy has removed a few sections of this as examples of items that do not qualify as designed by a seller. So it used to say selling bundles, collections, scan of PDF or PDF of someone else's work as a digital download, except in the case of qualifying vintage items. Now they've removed the except in the case of qualifying vintage items. It says the following is items do not qualify as designed by a seller, a bundle, collection, scan or PDF of someone else's work. Okay, so that, yes, that is removing the qualifying vintage items, but also that is only do not qualify as designed by a seller. It doesn't say you can't sell these on Etsy. It's just they're not in this category. Potential that I'm playing devil's advocate. This section's been removed entirely using a pre-existing design or choosing from a production partner's ready-made templates, except in the case of personalized by a buyer, see sourced by a seller. So this is removed. However, it is saying potentially, it has to be your own design. So they've maybe just removed it because it's saying you must have this thing elsewhere, but that's removed as items that don't qualify. Handpicked by a seller. So these are vintage items, items from nature, and certain collections. So yes, here is where they've said what can be sold, and it used to say vintage items. This also includes digital files of scanned vintage item content like photographs, books, or patterns. And now it doesn't say that. So it doesn't seem to include digital files of scanned vintage content like photographs, books, or patterns. However, and you can see in the example, Etsy hasn't changed any of the examples apart from the capitalization in EG, but that could just be whatever software they're using. They haven't changed any of their examples or any of their photo examples. So, e.g., a rockabilly dress from the 1950s, a copy of the book The Little Prince from the 1940s. A copy of a book. Let me know what you think. I don't know there. But anyway, and following are examples that do not qualify as handpicked by the seller. And they've added resold items from nature, bulk landscape rocks resold from Home Depot. So you can sell natural things that you've found, but you can't necessarily, you haven't found them commercially resold from somewhere else. So interesting. Again, I didn't know anyone was doing that, but yeah. This is the thing, Etsy does have to always update things because that's not in the nature, I would have thought. So sourced by a seller, items that enable buyer creativity, including craft and party supplies, and items that are personalized with a buyer's custom text or image. So what they have changed, they've added a part here talking about the following examples don't qualify as sourced by a seller. Resold generic cooking tools or ingredients. Ingredients is interesting. People used to sell like bundles of spices with recipes in them. I assume they'll still be okay because it's not just resold, you are adding to them. Chemical compounds, automotive and bicycle parts and repair tools, office, construction, gardening, cosmetic, or home DIY supplies. So it sort of makes sense. Tools to help crafters potentially, but a hammer with nothing done to it and no help by you is not really sourced within what Etsy is wanting, I think. Generic resold items that may be used at a party but either are not decor, that's fair enough, that was kind of a thing, or have everyday use, such as plain furniture, generic tableware, stage lights, speakers, costumes. I assume costumes are okay if they're for a specific party. Party favours and seasonal festive decor not specific to a single gathering or celebration, which is very interesting. So I get, yes, you can't sell cups and say that's a party supply. It has to be like Merry Christmas cups or something for that specific celebration or for a wedding, single use plastic. Anyway, yeah, party favors is interesting. I think Etsy need to clarify a lot of this. And here is another change that is interesting. Listings for items sourced by a seller must use photo or video content of items you have for sale. So, and not stock or commercial images. Now it says listings for items sourced by a seller must use photo or video content of items you have for sale or commercial images from the manufacturer or distributor. So that is interesting, because if you're reselling party supplies, you don't have to have them. Used to have them physically in your hand to take pictures of them. Now you can source them from elsewhere and use the commercial images if you're buying from Alibaba or something, and you have the right to use those images. So it's interesting. That's a change. I think that'll get a lot of complaints from people, but it's what Etsy's done. And yeah, that's the changes that I see. So let me know what you think. I think Etsy is going to say that they haven't really made any changes. They've just clarified points. I disagree with that. I think I sort of agree. In some respects, if you've got a 3D printer and you just buy a pattern of something, do we call them patterns? A file of how to make the thing, and you just print it out, and there are 400 other people doing the same thing on Etsy without making any changes to it. That's not really within the spirit of Etsy if you're designing your own files. But it also makes it harder. People are complaining, saying, well, they're the designer, they sell their designs on Etsy, and they're happy for other people to sell them. Well, those people aren't going to be able to sell them on Etsy, so they might be less likely to come to the designer. So indirectly it might make the creative person have less money in their pockets as well. Who knows? And yes, there are loopholes that make it seem a little not fair. Personally, I'm sorry if you sell these, but I think the scans of things like vintage patterns, I wasn't even sure if the copyright, if that was allowable to do anyway. You buy an old pattern and you scan it and you're selling stuff. I mean, people were selling stuff that were like 2 years old. That's definitely not allowed. But I think at the very least, I want on Etsy people to be able to find the people who are creating their own brand new patterns. I think that's cool. So yeah, tell me otherwise if I'm wrong, but I think I'm happy that scans of vintage patterns shouldn't be on Etsy. It should be the pattern, the vintage pattern. Yes, buying a load of rocks at Home Depot, that's not within the nature to be selling on Etsy. I suppose if you buy a load of rocks, pick through them, put them in your tumbler, work on them, polish them up, cut them, that might be different. But it's what Etsy thinks. Let me know what you think, though. I think there are some changes there. I think Etsy is opening the door for trying to shut down lots of duplicate items, listings that have been created using a pattern, you know, well, not a pattern, listings that have been created using a digital pattern for computer generated things. So you buy something from somebody, put it into your machine and say, print, cut, embroider, do that. I am not being involved in it. So, but it's a grey area. So I'm not sure, but I think more listings are going to be being taken down soon. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you're concerned, if some of your items might be not able to be sold. I'm going to be speaking to Etsy when I can. I'm going to be looking into all of this. So let me know your thoughts and fears. Let me know if you're happy with this, sad with this. Let me know what else they should have been stopping. I know people are going to say, well, absolutely, people are going to say AI. It's a little bit of a grey area if people are buying designs and combining them together. Is that still okay? And why is it not okay to buy a design and personalize it a wee bit, potentially, but it is okay to create AI slop? I know there's some good AI artists out there who are doing a lot of work. They're working with the AI as opposed to people who are just saying, make me 17 designs of a cat in a top hat, and they're not even checking out that the cat doesn't have 16 ears and two tails. So I'm going I'm going off on a tangent. I can't believe I tried to take a weekend off and Etsy went and dropped this on us. Let me know what you think, what's good, what's bad, what you're confused about. I will be digging into this more, but I've been digging into this since it happened, but I just wanted to get my thoughts out there for just now. So let me know what you think, and yeah, I'll see you next time.